At 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, three armed men walked into Bella Vista restaurant planning to execute CEO Victoria Ashford. They had no idea that Marcus Williams, the quiet black server they'd dismissed as invisible, was a former Army Ranger who'd survived 5 combat deployments. In the next 4 minutes, everything would change. But let's rewind to 10:30 that morning, when Marcus Williams pulled his aging Honda Civic into the employee parking lot behind Bella Vista, Atlanta's most exclusive Italian restaurant. The engine made that familiar rattling sound, the one that reminded him daily of the $800 repair he couldn't afford. Not this month. Maybe not next month either. Marcus sat in his car for exactly 90 seconds, staring at the small photograph tucked into his sun visor. 8-year-old Zara Williams beamed back at him, her gap-toothed smile radiating pure joy despite the faded edges of the school picture. Her hair was pulled back in neat braids, her uniform crisp, her eyes sparkling with the kind of intelligence that made teachers take notice and other parents ask what school she attended. "Daddy's got this, baby girl," Marcus whispered to the photo. His daily ritual, his source of strength, his reminder of why none of the struggle mattered as long as she was safe and happy. He adjusted his black server's uniform in the rearview mirror, the fabric crisp despite being 2 years old, and washed more times than he could count. The transformation was seamless now, practiced. Marcus Williams, the worried single father, became Marcus Williams, the professional server, polite, efficient, invisible. What his colleagues at Bella Vista didn't know was that professional meant something entirely different to Marcus than it did to most people. When he walked through those employee doors, his mind automatically began cataloging details with the precision of someone trained to stay alive in hostile territory. Table 12. The left rear leg wobbled slightly, potential hazard if a customer leaned back too hard. Table 8. Water spots on the wine glass that needed replacing before the lunch rush. The afternoon sun would hit table 15 at exactly 2:15 p.m., potentially blinding customers seated facing west. The emergency exit near the restrooms had a sticky lock that took an extra half-second to open. He'd timed it last week. These weren't the observations of an overly cautious server. They were the calculated assessments of Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, United States Army Rangers, who had spent 10 years learning that survival depended on noticing what others missed. "Morning, Marcus," called Tony Ritchie, the head chef, his voice carrying across the prep kitchen. "You ready for the corporate crowd today?" "Always ready, chef," Marcus replied, the response automatic. But always ready carried weight that Tony would never understand. Always ready meant knowing every exit, every potential weapon, every blind spot. Always ready meant never truly relaxing, even while serving salads and refilling water glasses. The morning prep routine began with military precision. Marcus checked his section methodically, 24 place settings across 6 tables, each one positioned exactly right. Napkins folded to regulation sharpness, silverware aligned with geometric accuracy. His fellow servers sometimes joked about his attention to detail, but they requested his help when VIP clients needed flawless service. At 11:45 a.m., the lunch crowd began filtering in. Business executives in $1,000 suits discussing mergers over aged wine. Real estate developers closing deals worth more than Marcus would earn in 5 years. Tech entrepreneurs whose casual conversations involved numbers that could change his and Zara's lives forever. Marcus served them all with the same respectful professionalism, but internally, he was calculating. Rent was due in 3 days. $1,200 for their small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was safe enough for Zara, but expensive enough to stretch his budget thin. The electricity bill sat unopened on his kitchen counter because he already knew the choice it represented. Keep the lights on or buy groceries for the next 2 weeks. These calculations occupied his mind until Victoria Ashford walked in. Victoria commanded attention without demanding it. In her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant style, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. Marcus had served many powerful people, but Victoria was different. When she spoke to him, she made eye contact. When she asked how his day was going, she actually listened to his answer. "The osso buco is exceptional today." Marcus recommended, as he presented the menu to Victoria's table. Chef Richie uses a wine reduction that's been developing since this morning. You know your menu well, Victoria observed, her tone appreciative rather than condescending. How long have you worked here? 2 years, ma'am. I take pride in understanding what we do best. Something in his bearing caught her attention. The ma'am wasn't casual politeness, it carried military weight. The way he stood, shoulders square, eyes alert, scanning the room even while focused on her table. Military? She asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. His army service wasn't something he advertised at Bella Vista. Most people either didn't care or made assumptions he preferred to avoid. Yes, ma'am. Army Rangers. 10 years. Victoria nodded with genuine understanding. Thank you for your service. The words were simple, but Marcus recognized sincerity when he heard it. Not the automatic response most people offered, but gratitude from someone who understood what service actually meant. As Marcus moved between his tables, refilling glasses and taking orders with practiced efficiency, his peripheral vision caught movement in the kitchen that made his instincts sharpen. Derek Hoffman, one of the line cooks, was having what looked like an increasingly heated phone conversation during his break. Derek had been at Bella Vista for 6 months, and something about him had always set Marcus on edge. It wasn't anything obvious. Derek showed up on time, did his job adequately, kept his complaints to the normal level of kitchen staff frustration. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts about people, and his instincts said Derek was carrying more anger than most people could handle safely. Over the past few weeks, Derek's mood had been deteriorating. Marcus had overheard fragments of conversations, complaints about being overlooked for promotion, resentment about his wages, bitter comments about the wealthy customers who left tips worth more than Derek made in a day. The kind of grievances that, in Marcus's experience, could fester into something dangerous. Today, Derek looked different. His movements were sharper, more aggressive. During his smoke breaks, he paced the alley behind the restaurant, his hands clenched into fists, his voice raised in what sounded like arguments with whoever he was calling. Marcus made a mental note to keep an eye on Derek, the same way he'd monitored potential threats in Afghanistan. It was probably nothing, just a man having a bad day, dealing with personal problems the way most people did. But Marcus had learned the hard way that probably nothing could turn deadly in seconds if you weren't paying attention. The lunch service continued smoothly. Victoria's table was deep in discussion about some kind of corporate acquisition, their voices low and serious. Marcus served them with the seamless professionalism that had made him one of Bella Vista's most requested servers, but part of his attention remained on Derek's increasingly erratic behavior in the kitchen. At 2:30 p.m., Marcus was clearing plates from Victoria's table when he heard Derek's voice rise above the normal kitchen noise. Not loud enough for the dining room to notice, but sharp enough to make Marcus's trained ears focus immediately. The conversation was brief, heated, and ended with Derek slamming his phone against the prep counter hard enough to crack the screen. Marcus Williams, restaurant server, would have noticed and moved on. Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, Army Ranger, recognized the sound of a man reaching his breaking point. Before we see what happens when a warrior has to choose between invisibility and action, hit that like button if you've ever felt overlooked despite having incredible skills. At exactly 2:47 p.m., Derek Hoffman's world collapsed completely. The phone call that had sent him over the edge came from his landlord. Eviction notice, effective immediately. 6 months behind on rent? No extensions, no mercy. The apartment where he'd lived for 3 years, the last stable thing in his crumbling life, was gone. Derek stared at his cracked phone screen, watching the call end, feeling something fundamental break inside his chest. Around him, the kitchen continued its usual rhythm, orders being called out, pans clattering, the endless dance of lunch service. But for Derek, everything had gone silent, except for the roaring in his ears. His locker stood open in the break room, and inside, wrapped in an old towel, was the AK-47 he'd bought 2 weeks ago from a guy who didn't ask questions. Derek had told himself it was for protection, for the neighborhood where he'd been sleeping in his car since losing the apartment. But deep down, he'd known this moment would come. The moment when he stopped being invisible. Derek pulled the weapon from his locker, his hands steady despite the chaos in his mind. The weight felt familiar, comfortable even. For the first time in months, he felt powerful instead of powerless. The kitchen door burst open with explosive force, Derek's shoulder driving through it like a battering ram. The AK-47 swept across the dining room as 23 customers and staff froze in various stages of their afternoon meals. The metallic click of the weapon being chambered cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a blade through silk. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Wine glasses hung suspended in air as minds struggled to process what they were seeing. Nobody move. Nobody fucking move. Derek's voice cracked with rage and desperation, his face flushed red, veins standing out on his neck. His eyes held the wild look of someone who had crossed a line and couldn't find their way back. Chaos erupted instantly. A woman at table 4 screamed, her chair toppling backward as she dove for cover. The Japanese businessmen at table 7 scattered like startled birds, their merger documents flying across white linen. Wine glasses shattered against marble floors. Designer handbags were abandoned as their owners crawled behind overturned furniture. But Marcus Williams didn't move. While everyone else's world descended into panic, Marcus's training kicked in, with crystalline clarity. His heartbeat remained steady, 72 beats per minute, the same rate he'd maintained during firefights in Kandahar. His breathing stayed controlled. His mind shifted into tactical assessment mode, processing information at superhuman speed. Threat assessment. One shooter, AK-47 variant, approximately 15 feet from his position. Amateur grip, emotional state compromised, finger on trigger, high volatility, moderate accuracy expected. Terrain analysis. 23 civilians in immediate danger, multiple cover options, 3 exits. Main entrance 30 feet away, kitchen doors 12 feet, emergency exit near restrooms 18 feet but partially blocked. Tactical advantage. Shooter's attention scattered, no clear target priority, positioning poor for controlling multiple escape routes. All of this processed in 1.3 seconds. "Everyone stay calm," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the screaming with absolute authority. It wasn't loud, but it carried the unmistakable weight of command, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life or death situations. Do exactly what he says. Move slowly, no sudden movements. The effect was immediate. Terrified whispers replaced panicked screams. People stopped their frantic scrambling and focused on the quiet server who had somehow become their anchor in the storm. Victoria Ashford, who had been reaching for her phone, froze at the sound of Marcus's voice. Something in his tone commanded instant obedience, not fear-based compliance, but the natural response to genuine leadership under pressure. Derek swung the rifle toward Marcus, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You, server boy, you think you're in charge now?" Marcus raised his hands slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. But his eyes never left Derek's face, and his positioning was anything but random. Each micro-adjustment put him at a better angle, created cleaner sight lines, positioned him between the shooter and the largest group of civilians. "I'm not in charge of anything," Marcus replied calmly. "You are. What do you need?" It was textbook de-escalation technique combined with tactical positioning. Acknowledge the aggressor's perceived control while gathering intelligence and creating opportunities. Derek's laugh came out harsh and bitter. What I need is for these rich bastards to understand what it's like to have nothing." He gestured wildly with the rifle, causing several customers to flinch. "To work your ass off for scraps while they throw away more money on lunch than I make in a month." Behind Derek, Marcus caught movement in the kitchen. Tony and the other staff were evacuating through the back exit. Good. Fewer variables, fewer people in the line of fire. Marcus took a barely perceptible half-step to his left, improving his angle while maintaining the illusion of compliance. "I understand," he said, and meant it. "The system's rigged. You work hard, follow the rules, and it still isn't enough. Don't patronize me." Derek's voice cracked with emotion. "You don't know anything about my life, about what I've lost." "You're right," Marcus admitted, his tone genuine. "But I know what it feels like to struggle, to choose between paying rent and buying food for your family, to feel like nobody sees you, nobody cares if you disappear." For a moment, something flickered in Derek's eyes. Recognition, maybe. The briefest connection between two men who understood financial desperation. But the moment passed, and Derek's rage returned, fueled by months of accumulated frustration and the finality of his situation. "I lost everything," Derek screamed, his voice breaking. "My apartment, my car, my girlfriend. She left when the money ran out. I've been sleeping in my car for 2 weeks, showering in gas station bathrooms, and these people." He gestured at the dining room with the rifle. "These people spend more on wine than I made all last month." Marcus could see Derek's control deteriorating rapidly. The man's breathing was becoming erratic, his grip on the weapon less steady. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's air conditioning. Every indicator suggested he was approaching the point where talking would become impossible. "Derek," Marcus said quietly, using the man's name deliberately. "I hear you. Your pain is real, but this won't fix anything. This will only make it worse." "Worse?" Derek's voice rose to near hysteria. "How could it possibly get worse? I've got nothing left to lose." "You've got your life," Marcus replied, "and so do all these people, including kids who are waiting for their parents to come home." Derek's gaze swept the room, taking in the terrified faces, the overturned chairs, the wine stains spreading across white tablecloths like blood. For just a moment, Marcus thought he might be getting through, but Derek's phone, lying on the floor where he dropped it, buzzed with another call. The screen showed his ex-girlfriend's name, probably calling to tell him she was keeping his security deposit, or that his belongings were on the sidewalk, or some other final humiliation. The sound snapped Derek's last thread of control. "I just wanted them to see," he screamed, swinging the rifle toward Victoria's table, where the tech executives were huddled behind overturned chairs. "I wanted them to know what it feels like to lose everything." Marcus saw Derek's finger move toward the trigger, saw the barrel align with innocent people who would die simply because they'd chosen the wrong restaurant for lunch. In that instant, every calculation, every tactical consideration, every de-escalation technique became irrelevant. Derek Hoffman was about to commit mass murder, and Marcus Williams, father, server, soldier, could not let that happen. The transformation was instantaneous and complete. The quiet, invisible server disappeared, replaced by Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, United States Army Rangers, who had made a career of doing the impossible when lives depended on it. Time seemed to slow as Marcus made the choice that would change everything. Drop a comment. What would you do if you had 3 seconds to decide between staying safe and saving strangers? What happened next defied every assumption Derek Hoffman had made about the quiet black server he'd barely noticed during 6 months of working in the same building. Marcus Williams moved. Not the careful, measured steps of de-escalation, but the explosive, predatory motion of a combat veteran who had decided that talking time was over. His body launched forward and to the right in a diagonal trajectory that turned Table 9 into a springboard. His left hand using the marble surface to redirect his momentum while his right arm reached for Derek's weapon. The movement was so sudden, so unexpected, that Derek's mind couldn't process it fast enough to react. One moment he was aiming at terrified executives. The next, a man he'd dismissed as invisible, was flying through the air toward him with the fluid precision of a guided missile. Derek's finger squeezed the trigger reflexively, but Marcus had anticipated that. His trajectory took him below the weapon's line of fire as the AK-47 discharged 3 rounds into the ornate ceiling, sending chunks of plaster raining down on abandoned tables. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, but Marcus barely registered it. His world had narrowed to a single objective: neutralize the threat without killing the man behind it. The collision drove both men backward through the kitchen doors in a controlled crash that Marcus had calculated to the inch. His shoulder absorbed the impact while his momentum carried Derek off balance, the rifle spinning away across the prep station floor. 3 seconds. That's how long it took Marcus Williams to transform from invisible server to elite warrior and back again. Second one. Marcus's palm strike connected with Derek's solar plexus with exactly the right force, enough to drop him without causing internal damage. Years of training had taught Marcus the difference between neutralizing and destroying. Second 2. Derek doubled over, gasping, his hands instinctively moving to protect his midsection. Marcus used that moment to pivot behind him, one arm sliding around Derek's neck in a textbook blood choke that would render him unconscious in approximately 8 seconds without permanent injury. Second 3. Derek's legs buckled as the choke took effect. Marcus controlled his descent, ensuring he didn't strike his head on the stainless steel prep counters that surrounded them. The kitchen fell silent, except for Derek's labored breathing and the distant sound of sirens Marcus had called for without anyone noticing. A speed dial to 911 he'd programmed during his first week at Bella Vista, back when his hypervigilance seemed like paranoia rather than preparation. Kitchen secured, Marcus announced in the crisp, authoritative tone he'd used to brief commanding officers in Afghanistan. Threat neutralized, weapon recovered, no injuries to civilians or staff. Victoria Ashford appeared in the doorway, her phone still in her hand, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and recognition. She'd suspected Marcus was former military, but witnessing his transformation from server to soldier had been like watching Clark Kent become Superman. "How did you?" she started, then stopped herself. The question wasn't how. It was clear that Marcus possessed skills far beyond anything required for restaurant service. The real question was why someone with his capabilities was working for tips and minimum wage. Derek was conscious but subdued, his earlier rage replaced by confusion and shame. Marcus kept him in a control position, not painful but impossible to escape, while Tony emerged from the walk-in freezer where he'd taken shelter. "Jesus, Marcus," Tony whispered, staring at the scene. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Army," Marcus replied simply, his attention focused on monitoring Derek's condition. The man was breathing normally, no signs of injury beyond bruised pride and the crushing weight of his poor choices. Derek looked up at Marcus with eyes that held a mixture of fear and something else, a recognition that the man who had stopped him could easily have killed him, but chose not to. "I just wanted them to understand," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I wanted them to know what it's like to lose everything." Marcus's expression softened. Even with Derek neutralized, even with the immediate threat ended, he felt no anger toward the broken man beneath him. He understood desperation, understood the feeling of being invisible while struggling to survive. "I know," Marcus said quietly, "but this wasn't the way to make them see you." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Derek had spent months dismissing Marcus as just another service worker, another invisible body moving through his peripheral vision. He'd never looked closely enough to notice the military bearing, the tactical awareness, the quiet competence that marked Marcus as someone exceptional. Atlanta Police Department officers burst through both the front and back entrances simultaneously, weapons drawn, moving with the coordinated precision of a well-trained unit. Marcus immediately raised his hands while maintaining his position over Derek. "I'm the one who called it in," he announced clearly. "Former military, currently employed here. The perpetrator is secured and no longer armed. Weapon is on the floor to your left, 3 rounds discharged. No injuries to report." Detective Rodriguez, the lead officer on scene, approached cautiously. She'd handled enough crisis situations to recognize competence when she saw it, and everything about Marcus's demeanor screamed professional experience. "Can you walk me through what happened?" she asked, her notepad ready. Marcus's debrief was textbook military precision. No speculation, no emotional coloring, just facts delivered in chronological order with tactical assessments attached. He described Derek's deteriorating mental state, the moment the situation escalated beyond de-escalation possibilities, and his decision to intervene. The subject had his finger on the trigger and was aiming at a table of civilians, Marcus explained. "Based on his emotional state and positioning, I assessed a high probability of mass casualties if he was allowed to discharge his weapon. Intervention was necessary to prevent loss of life." Detective Rodriguez had been a police officer for 15 years, but she'd rarely heard such a clinical, yet compassionate assessment of a violent encounter. This wasn't someone who had acted out of heroic impulse or adrenaline-fueled instinct. This was someone who had calculated risk versus reward in real time and executed a plan with surgical precision. "Your military service?" she asked. "Army Rangers, 10 years. 3 deployments Afghanistan, 2 Iraq. Staff sergeant upon discharge." The numbers told a story of someone who had seen combat, who had been trusted with leadership responsibilities, who had skills that translated directly to civilian crisis management. The detective found herself wondering, like Victoria, why someone with Marcus's qualifications was working in food service. But that question would have to wait. Right now, she had a crime scene to process and a suspect to interview. As EMTs checked Derek for injuries, finding none beyond minor bruising, Marcus stood quietly to one side, already transitioning back to his civilian persona. The transformation was remarkable to watch. The commanding presence that had taken control of a life-threatening situation gradually faded, replaced by the modest, self-effacing demeanor of a man who preferred to remain unnoticed. Victoria remained in the kitchen, ostensibly providing her statement to officers, but actually studying Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone who recognized exceptional talent. She'd built a successful company by identifying people whose capabilities exceeded their current circumstances, and Marcus Williams was exactly that kind of person. The restaurant's other customers had been evacuated and were giving statements in the parking lot, but Victoria had specifically requested to remain close to the scene. She wanted to understand what she'd witnessed, wanted to process how someone she'd known only as an excellent server had revealed himself to be something far more extraordinary. "The way you moved," she said during a brief moment when they were alone. "That wasn't self-defense class training." Marcus glanced at her, reading the intelligence in her eyes, the genuine curiosity rather than sensationalist interest. "No, ma'am. That was staying alive long enough to come home to my daughter." The answer revealed everything Victoria needed to know. This wasn't someone who enjoyed violence or sought out conflict. This was a father who had done what was necessary to protect innocent people, including her, because his moral code demanded nothing less. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, still weeping, he looked back at Marcus one final time. "Thank you," he said quietly, for not making it worse than it had to be." Marcus nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement between two men who understood that circumstances could push anyone to their breaking point. The difference was in how you responded when that moment came. The local news crews were already setting up outside, drawn by police scanners and social media posts about the incident. Marcus could see reporters interviewing witnesses, could hear fragments of descriptions that made him uncomfortable. Hero. Incredible. Like something out of a movie. But Marcus didn't feel heroic. He felt like a man who had done his job, the same job he'd been doing his entire adult life, whether in uniform or civilian clothes. Protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Use whatever skills you possessed in service of something larger than yourself. Go home to the people who depended on you. The invisible server had become visible in the most dramatic way possible, but all Marcus wanted was to return to the shadows, to the quiet anonymity that allowed him to focus on what mattered most, providing for Zara and keeping their small family safe. Subscribe if you believe everyone deserves to be seen for their true worth, not just their uniform. The video appeared online within 2 hours. Shot from behind an overturned table by someone with remarkably steady hands, it captured Marcus's explosive movement across the dining room, the 3-second takedown, and his calm professionalism in the aftermath. By 6 p.m., it had 500,000 views. By 8 p.m., it was trending on every social media platform with hashtags like Hero Server and Invisible Warrior. Marcus discovered this when his phone started buzzing incessantly during the drive to pick up Zara from after-school care. Text messages from numbers he didn't recognize, missed calls from local news stations, and a growing sense that his carefully constructed anonymity had been shattered beyond repair. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the after-school program, met him at the door with wide eyes and barely contained excitement. "Mr. Williams, is it true? What they're saying on the news? That you saved all those people?" Marcus nodded briefly, uncomfortable with the attention. "Is Zara ready?" "She's in the TV room with the other children. They've been watching the coverage, and when your name came up..." Mrs. Patterson paused, her expression softening. "She's been telling everyone that she knew you were special." Marcus found Zara surrounded by her classmates, all 8 years old, and chattering excitedly about superheroes and real-life action movies. When she saw him, her face lit up with a mixture of pride and relief that nearly broke his heart. "Daddy!" She ran to him with the kind of fierce hug reserved for moments when children realize how much they depend on the adults who love them. "I saw you on TV. Mrs. Patterson showed us the video." The drive home was filled with Zara's questions, each one revealing how much she understood and how much she didn't. She knew her father had stopped bad things from happening, but the full weight of how close she'd come to losing him remained mercifully abstract. "Were you scared?" she asked as they pulled into their apartment complex. "A little," Marcus admitted, "but I knew I had to come home to you, so I did what I needed to do. Tommy Martinez said his dad thinks you're like Captain America, but I told him you were better because you're my daddy." That evening, after Zara had fallen asleep clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table and tried to process how completely his world had changed in the span of 6 hours. The bills that had seemed insurmountable that morning were still there. The rent notice, the electricity warning, the careful calculations that governed their daily life. But now there were other considerations. Reporters who wanted interviews, attention he'd never sought, and the growing realization that his military past was no longer a private matter. His phone rang at 9:30 p.m. The number had a Washington, D.C. area code. "Mr. Williams? This is Captain Jennifer Hayes, U.S. Army. I hope I'm not calling too late." Marcus straightened instinctively. "No, ma'am. How can I help you?" "I wanted to reach out personally to commend you for your actions today. What you did, the way you handled that situation, reflects the highest traditions of the Rangers and the Army. We're proud to claim you as one of our own." The call was brief but meaningful. Captain Hayes explained that Marcus's actions had been noted at the Pentagon, that his former commanding officers had been contacted, and that his service record would reflect this civilian act of heroism. "There are opportunities available if you're interested in returning to service in a consulting capacity," she mentioned before ending the call. "People with your skills and proven judgment are always needed." After hanging up, Marcus realized he was being offered multiple paths forward, each representing a fundamental change from the quiet life he'd built with Zara. The question was whether he was ready to step out of the shadows permanently. The answer came the next afternoon in the form of Victoria Ashford, standing in his apartment complex parking lot, looking dramatically out of place among the aging cars and chain-link fences. Marcus was returning from the grocery store when he spotted her, and the contrast was striking. Victoria's elegant coat and designer handbag spoke of a world where money wasn't counted twice before spending, where choices weren't constantly weighed against survival needs. "Ms. Ashford," he said, approaching cautiously, "is everything all right?" "I wanted to thank you properly," she replied, but her attention was drawn to the code playground behind the complex, where Zara was playing on swings that had seen better years. "And I wanted to meet the little girl who clearly means everything to you." Zara noticed them talking and bounded over with the fearless curiosity of childhood. She studied Victoria with the serious assessment that 8-year-olds bring to important adult relationships. "Are you the lady Daddy saved yesterday?" Zara asked directly. Victoria smiled, the first completely unguarded expression Marcus had seen from her. "I'm one of them, yes. Your daddy was very brave." "I know," Zara replied matter-of-factly. "He's always brave. He kills spiders and checks for monsters and makes sure I'm safe when there's thunder." The simple honesty of Zara's response seemed to affect Victoria profoundly. Marcus watched as something shifted in her expression, a recognition that heroism wasn't just about dramatic moments, but about daily acts of protection and care. "Would you like to see our apartment?" Zara offered with the hospitality of someone who had been taught to be gracious regardless of circumstances. "Daddy makes really good mac and cheese." Victoria glanced at Marcus, who nodded slightly. "I'd be honored." The walk to their apartment gave Victoria time to absorb the environment Marcus and Zara called home. The complex was clean, but aging, the kind of place where working families stretched every dollar and children played in parking lots because proper code playgrounds were luxuries their neighborhoods couldn't afford. Inside their modest 2-bedroom unit, Victoria's trained eye took in details that told a story of careful management and quiet pride. Everything was immaculately clean, despite being secondhand. Zara's artwork covered the refrigerator and one entire wall. Her small collection of soccer trophies lined the mantelpiece with the prominence usually reserved for priceless antiques. "Daddy won these when he was a soldier," Zara explained, pointing to Marcus's military commendations displayed in a simple frame. "He was really important, but now he brings people food so he can take care of me." Victoria studied the decorations, a bronze star, combat ribbons, certificates of valor, and understood that she was looking at the achievements of someone who had served with genuine distinction. The disconnect between Marcus's qualifications and his current employment became even more stark. "Mr. Williams," she said after Zara had gone to her room to fetch some drawings to show their guest, "I have a proposition for you." "Ma'am?" "I run a security consulting firm. We work with corporations, government agencies, high-profile individuals who need the kind of expertise you demonstrated yesterday. The kind that comes from real experience, not just training manuals." Marcus remained quiet, waiting for her to continue. "The starting salary would be $85,000 annually, with performance bonuses and full benefits. There would be some travel, but we accommodate family obligations, and there would be advancement opportunities. I'm looking for someone to eventually head our personal protection division." The offer hung in the air between them, representing financial security Marcus had never imagined possible. With that salary, he could move Zara to a better neighborhood, ensure she had every educational opportunity, stop choosing between necessities. But it also represented risk. Security work, even consulting, carried dangers that restaurant service didn't. And if something happened to him, Zara would be alone. "I appreciate the offer," Marcus said carefully, "but I need to think about what's best for my daughter." Victoria nodded with understanding. "Of course. But Marcus, I want you to know this isn't charity or some feel-good gesture. After what I witnessed yesterday, I'm convinced you're exactly the person I need on my team. Your skills, your judgment under pressure, your moral compass. Those are assets any organization would be fortunate to have." When Zara returned with her drawings, Victoria spent another 20 minutes examining each one with the attention usually reserved museum pieces. She asked questions about school, friends, soccer, treating Zara like someone whose opinions mattered. As Victoria prepared to leave, she handed Marcus her business card along with something else, a handwritten note. "My personal number," she explained. "Not for business. In case you or Zara ever need anything. What you did yesterday saved my life, but watching you with your daughter today showed me something equally important. What real strength looks like." After Victoria left, Zara curled up next to Marcus on their warm couch, processing the encounter with her usual thoughtfulness. "I like her," she announced. "She listened when I talked, and she didn't pretend my pictures were good just to be nice. She really looked at them." Marcus smiled, recognizing his daughter's sophisticated assessment of adult sincerity. "She seems very kind. Are you going to work for her instead of at the restaurant?" The question cut to the heart of Marcus's dilemma. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that opportunity often comes with risk? That the chance to provide better for your family might also mean putting yourself in danger? "I don't know yet, baby girl. What do you think I should do?" Zara considered this with the gravity she brought to all important decisions. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy, Daddy. You take care of me no matter what job you have." Her absolute faith in his ability to provide and protect, regardless of circumstances, reminded Marcus why every decision ultimately came back to her. Zara believed in him completely, trusted him to make choices that would keep their family safe and together. The question was whether he trusted himself enough to step into the light permanently, to embrace the recognition Victoria was offering, and to build the kind of future Zara deserved. The coffee shop Victoria had chosen for their meeting was deliberately ordinary, a local place in Marcus's neighborhood where the baristas knew customers by name and conversations happened over ceramic mugs instead of disposable cups. When Marcus arrived, he almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the tailored suits and corporate armor. Victoria sat in a corner booth wearing jeans, a simple sweater, and sneakers that looked like she actually walked in them. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and she was reading a paperback novel with the focused attention of someone who read for pleasure, not just information. "You look different," Marcus said as he slid into the opposite seat. "So do you," Victoria replied, glancing at his civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt that Zara had picked out because she said it made his eyes look super nice. More relaxed. They ordered coffee, black for both of them, another small similarity in a relationship built on unexpected connections. Victoria closed her book and leaned forward, her expression serious but not intimidating. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," she began, "about why you're working at Bella Vista when you clearly belong somewhere else." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, considering his words. Belonging somewhere and being able to afford somewhere are different things. "Tell me about your transition out of the army. What happened when you got home?" The question opened a door Marcus rarely allowed himself to walk through. "Zara's mom died when she was 5. Car accident. I was deployed when it happened, and by the time I got emergency leave and came home." He paused, the familiar weight of guilt settling in his chest. "I realized I couldn't be the father she needed while serving overseas, so I got out." Victoria nodded with understanding, "And civilian employers didn't know what to do with your skill set." "Exactly. I applied for police departments, security firms, corporate positions. Everyone wanted experience I didn't have or certifications I couldn't afford to get. The military gave me leadership skills, tactical expertise, the ability to make life or death decisions under pressure. But none of that translates easily on a resume." "So you took whatever would pay the bills," Victoria concluded. "Restaurant work is honest, stable, and it let me be home every night with Zara. That mattered more than anything else." Victoria studied him with the calculating gaze he'd seen her use during business discussions. "Can I tell you what I observed about you that day at the restaurant, before everything happened?" Marcus nodded. "You approached your job with the same level of professionalism I see from executives running multi-million-dollar divisions. You knew every detail about the menu, every customer's preferences, every potential problem before it happened. You treated serving food like a military operation, and you were excellent at it. It was just doing my job." "No," Victoria said firmly. "It was bringing extraordinary capabilities to ordinary circumstances. The way you handled Derek wasn't just training, it was judgment, compassion, and precision under pressure. Those are exactly the qualities I need in someone who's going to be responsible for protecting people's lives." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. "This is a formal offer. $85,000 starting salary, full health benefits, life insurance, and a college fund contribution for Zara. The work involves consulting on security protocols, training corporate teams, and occasional personal protection assignments." Marcus opened the folder, scanning numbers that represented financial security he'd never imagined possible. With this salary, Zara could attend private schools, participate in advanced programs, have opportunities limited only by her potential rather than their budget. "The travel requirements?" he asked. "Maybe once a month, usually not more than 2 days, and we work around your schedule. Zara comes first. That's not negotiable. It's a strength. Someone with that clear priority system makes better decisions under pressure." "What made you think I'd be interested?" Victoria smiled, the first time Marcus had seen her look genuinely amused. "Because when I complimented your service at the restaurant, you didn't just say thank you. You explained exactly why you'd recommended the ossobuco, the wine reduction, Chef Richie's technique, how long it had been developing. You couldn't help being excellent, even when no one was watching." The observation hit closer to home than Marcus expected. He had felt constrained at Bella Vista, using perhaps 10% of his capabilities, while circumstances demanded he be grateful for steady employment. "There's something else," Victoria continued. "After what happened, I had my team run a background check. Not to spy on you, but to understand what we were dealing with." Marcus stiffened slightly. "Your military record is extraordinary. Commendations for valor, leadership under fire, tactical innovations that were adopted army-wide. Your commanding officers all said the same thing. You were someone they'd trust with their lives and the lives of their soldiers. She paused, letting that sink in. But the thing that convinced me you were the right person happened when you were restraining Derek. You could have seriously injured him. He was armed, dangerous, threatening innocent people. Instead, you used exactly the force necessary to stop him, without causing permanent harm. That's not just training, Marcus. That's character. The weight of recognition felt strange after 3 years of professional invisibility. Marcus had become accustomed to being valued for his reliability and courtesy, not for the skills and judgment that had defined his adult identity. I have one concern, he said finally. If something happens to me, what happens to Zara? She's already lost her mother. She can't lose her father, too. Victoria's expression softened. I understand that fear completely. But can I ask you something? Do you think she's safer with a father who's using his full potential to build a secure future, or one who's limiting himself to avoid risk? The question reframed everything Marcus had been thinking about the decision. He'd been focusing on the immediate physical dangers of security work while ignoring the long-term risks of underemployment. The constant financial stress, the limited opportunities for Zara, the example he was setting about accepting less than his capabilities warranted. You're not seeking attention or recognition, Victoria continued. You just want to go home to your daughter every night. That's exactly why I trust you to make smart decisions in dangerous situations. You have something irreplaceable to protect. Marcus thought about Zara's absolute faith in his ability to provide for their family, her pride in his military service, her casual assumption that Daddy could handle whatever challenges arose. She believed in him completely, but lately he hadn't been believing in himself. The truth is, he said slowly, I've felt incomplete for the past 3 years, like I was using maybe half of who I am, and the other half was just waiting. For what? For someone to see the whole person instead of just the surface. Victoria nodded with understanding. That's exactly what I'm offering, a chance to use everything you are, not just the parts that fit conveniently into other people's expectations. Marcus looked at the contract again, but this time he wasn't seeing numbers. He was seeing possibilities. Zara in better schools, living in safer neighborhoods, having access to opportunities that could shape her entire future. He was seeing himself using skills and experience that mattered, making decisions that had real consequences, contributing something meaningful instead of just surviving from paycheck to paycheck. But more than that, he was seeing a version of himself that Zara could be genuinely proud of. Not just because he took care of her, but because he was living up to his full potential while doing it. When I was deployed, Marcus said finally, the thing that kept me focused was knowing I was serving something bigger than myself. Taking care of my daughter is the most important mission I'll ever have. But maybe it's time to stop limiting how effectively I can accomplish it. He looked up at Victoria with a decision made. I'm interested. When do we start? Victoria's smile was immediate and genuine. Welcome to the team, Marcus. We start whenever you're ready to stop being invisible. As they shook hands across the small table, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a recognition that he was choosing not just a new job, but a new version of himself. One that honored both his commitment to Zara and his responsibility to use his gifts in service of something meaningful. The invisible server was ready to step fully into the light. Have you ever had to choose between safe and meaningful? Tell us about it below. 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood at the head of a polished conference table in downtown Atlanta, wearing a charcoal gray suit that had been tailored to his exact measurements. The man addressing a team of 12 security professionals bore little resemblance to the quiet server who had once calculated tips to determine whether he could afford both electricity and groceries. Threat assessment indicates 3 primary vulnerabilities during tomorrow's embassy reception, Marcus said, pointing to architectural diagrams displayed on the wall-mounted screen. Entry points here and here need additional coverage and will need mobile units positioned at 15-minute intervals along the motorcade route. The team around the table, former police detectives, military veterans, corporate security specialists, listened with the focused attention reserved for someone whose expertise had been proven under fire. Marcus's reputation had grown steadily since joining Victoria's firm, built on a foundation of meticulous planning, flawless execution, and the rare ability to anticipate problems before they materialized. "Questions?" Marcus asked, scanning faces that reflected professional respect, rather than the polite indifference he'd once known at Bella Vista. Detective Rodriguez, who had responded to the restaurant incident months earlier and now worked part-time consulting for the firm, raised her hand. "What's your read on the crowd control situation near the university? Student demonstrations have been escalating lately." "Already coordinated with campus security and local PD," Marcus replied. "We'll have plainclothes officers integrated with the crowd, communication channels established with demonstration organizers, and contingency routes mapped if we need to modify the schedule." The thoroughness of his preparation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. This was someone who understood that protecting lives meant accounting for every variable, no matter how unlikely. After the briefing ended and his team dispersed to their assignments, Marcus returned to his office on the building's 22nd floor. The space reflected his journey from invisibility to authority. Not ostentatious, but undeniably professional. Military commendations hung alongside corporate achievement awards. A photograph of Zara in her new school uniform occupied the center of his desk, flanked by tactical manuals and industry certifications he'd earned during his first months with the firm. The view from his window encompassed the restaurant district, where Bella Vista sat 12 blocks away. Sometimes Marcus could see the building from here, a reminder of how dramatically his circumstances had changed in less than a year. His phone buzzed with a text from Zara. "Daddy, I scored 2 goals at practice today. Coach says I might make varsity next year even though I'm only in 4th grade." Marcus smiled, feeling the familiar surge of pride that accompanied every update about his daughter's achievements. The private academy she now attended had recognized her academic potential immediately, placing her in accelerated programs that challenged her intellect while supporting her athletic interests. The house they'd moved into 3 months ago sat in a neighborhood where children played in actual parks instead of parking lots, where Zara could walk to school safely and invite friends over without Marcus worrying about their environment. The mortgage payment was manageable now, rather than a source of constant anxiety. But the most significant change wasn't financial. It was the integration of all parts of Marcus's identity into a coherent whole. For 3 years, he'd compartmentalized himself. Marcus the father, Marcus the employee, Marcus the former soldier. Now, for the first time since leaving the army, those aspects worked in harmony rather than competing for attention. Victoria appeared in his doorway at 4:30 p.m., carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose instincts had been validated repeatedly. "How's tomorrow's prep looking?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Solid. The team's ready, contingencies are mapped, and our principal is briefed on protocols." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "Romanian foreign minister, right? Any specific threat intelligence I should know about?" "Nothing beyond the standard diplomatic risks. But that's why I wanted you leading this one. Your attention to detail and your ability to keep everyone calm if situations develop." Victoria studied the military photo on his desk. Marcus in dress uniform, younger but carrying the same steady confidence that had caught her attention months ago. "I've been thinking about that day at the restaurant. About what made me certain you were the right person for this job." "What conclusion did you reach?" "It wasn't just your tactical skills or your military background. It was that you treated everyone with the same level of respect. Me, the other customers, even Derek after you'd stopped him. That kind of character can't be taught." Marcus nodded, remembering Derek's breakdown, the man's desperate need to be seen and understood. "Speaking of Derek, I heard he's doing better. Got into that rehabilitation program you recommended." "He is. Sometimes people just need a second chance and the right support structure." Victoria paused, her expression becoming more personal. "You know, when I offered you this position, part of me was acting on instinct. I knew you were capable, but I wasn't sure how you'd adapt to corporate security culture. And now? Now you're training other consultants. Clients specifically request your team for high-risk assignments. You've exceeded every expectation I had." She gestured around the office. But more importantly, you seem like yourself again. Complete. The observation resonated deeply with Marcus. He had felt fragmented for years, using only portions of his capabilities, while other parts of his identity remained dormant. The integration hadn't happened overnight, but gradually, as he'd begun applying military precision to civilian protection, leadership skills to team management, tactical thinking to corporate security challenges. It's strange, Marcus said. At Bella Vista, I felt invisible even when I was doing good work. Here, I feel like everything I've learned and experienced has purpose. That's because you're not hiding anymore. You're not minimizing yourself to fit into spaces too small for your actual capabilities. Victoria's phone buzzed with a message, and she glanced at it briefly. The Romanian minister's advanced team is impressed with our preliminary security assessment. They're talking about extending our contract for his entire U.S. tour. Good. That's a significant opportunity. It's also a testament to what you've built here. 18 months ago, you were serving pasta to pay rent. Now you're briefing foreign security services and training federal agents. The progression still felt somewhat surreal to Marcus, but he'd learned to accept recognition as something earned rather than accidental. His success hadn't come from luck or connections. It had come from applying skills developed through years of service and challenge. At 5:15 p.m., Marcus gathered his materials for the next day's assignment and prepared to head home. The commute to his new house took 25 minutes through neighborhoods where sidewalks were well-maintained and streetlights actually worked. Zara met him at the front door with her usual enthusiasm, but now she was wearing the uniform of a school that offered advanced mathematics, competitive athletics, and college preparatory programs. Her bedroom walls were covered with academic achievement certificates alongside her growing collection of soccer trophies. "Tell me about practice," Marcus said as they walked to the kitchen together. "Coach Martinez says I have potential for elite-level competition if I keep developing my skills. She used to play professionally in Colombia." Zara's excitement was infectious. "And Mrs. Chen thinks I should enter the state mathematics competition next year." Marcus listened to her detailed account of academic and athletic progress, marveling at how opportunities had multiplied once financial constraints were removed. Zara's potential had always been exceptional, but now she had access to resources that could help her realize it fully. Over dinner, takeout from a restaurant they chose because they liked it rather than because it was affordable, Zara asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Daddy, are you happy with your new job?" The question deserved thoughtful consideration. "Yes, baby girl. Very happy. I get to use all the skills I learned in the army to help keep people safe, and it lets me provide the kind of life you deserve." "Good," Zara said with satisfaction. "I like seeing you excited about work. Before you seemed sad sometimes, even when you were smiling." Her perception reminded Marcus how much children absorbed, even when adults thought they were successfully hiding their struggles. Zara had watched him wrestle with underemployment and financial stress, had sensed his frustration even when he'd tried to shield her from it. Now she saw him leaving for work with anticipation rather than resignation, coming home energized rather than drained, discussing professional challenges with enthusiasm rather than enduring them with quiet determination. "I'm proud of you," Zara added, the simple statement carrying more weight than any professional accolade. "Not just because you're good at your job, but because you're using all of yourself instead of just part of yourself." Her insight was remarkably sophisticated for someone her age, but it captured exactly what had changed in Marcus's life. He was no longer fragmenting his identity to fit circumstances, no longer accepting limitations that didn't reflect his actual capabilities. The invisible server had become not just visible, but indispensable to his clients, his team, and most importantly, to the daughter who had always believed in his potential, even when he'd struggled to believe in it himself. 1 year after the incident at Bella Vista, Marcus Williams stood in the backyard of his new house, watching Zara practice soccer drills on grass that belonged to them. The evening light cast long shadows across their quarter-acre lot, space that had seemed impossible when they'd lived paycheck to paycheck. but now felt like the natural result of hard work and recognized potential. "Daddy!" Zara called out, jogging toward him with a soccer ball tucked under her arm. "Emma Rodriguez at school says you're famous now. She saw you on the news when you protected that ambassador from Germany." Marcus smiled, recognizing the mixture of pride and curiosity in his daughter's voice. At 9 years old, she was beginning to understand that her father's work involved more than the routine she'd known at Bella Vista. "I'm not famous, sweetheart. I just do my job well." "But it's a different job than serving food," Zara observed with the directness that children brought to important conversations. "This one fits you better." Her assessment was remarkably accurate. Marcus had spent 3 years forcing himself into roles too small for his actual capabilities, accepting limitations that reflected circumstances rather than potential. Now, he operated in environments that demanded everything he had learned about leadership, strategy, and protection. "You know what I think?" Zara continued, settling beside him on the wooden bench he'd installed near her practice area. "I think you were always this person, but nobody could see it before." "What do you mean?" "Like when you helped Mrs. Strike Chen with her groceries when those boys were bothering her. Or when you stayed up all night with me when I had the flu and couldn't sleep. You were protecting people and taking care of them, even when you were just bringing them pasta." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A recognition that Zara had understood something about his character that he'd been struggling to articulate, even to himself. His heroism hadn't emerged suddenly during the restaurant crisis. It had been there consistently, expressed through daily acts of service and protection that nobody had labeled exceptional. "Heroes aren't born, baby girl," he said quietly. "They're revealed, usually when people need them most." "So you were already a hero when you were my server, Daddy?" "I was already your protector. The job title didn't change that." As twilight settled over their neighborhood, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The house around them represented more than improved financial circumstances. It embodied security instead of mere survival, choices made from strength rather than desperation. Zara's bedroom now contained bookshelves filled with advanced reading materials, walls decorated with academic achievement awards, and a desk where she completed homework for classes that challenged her exceptional mind. But the most significant change wasn't material. It was the confidence she carried, the certainty that her potential would be supported and developed rather than constrained by economic limitations. "I'm proud of you," Marcus told her as they walked inside for dinner. "Not because of my job, but because you've stayed kind and curious and caring despite everything changing around us." "Nothing important changed," Zara replied with 9-year-old wisdom. "You still make me feel safe, and you still help people who need help. You just get paid better now." After dinner, as Zara completed her homework at the kitchen table, Marcus found himself thinking about the photograph that had sustained him during those difficult years, the school picture he'd kept in his car visor, the image that had reminded him daily why every struggle was worthwhile. That same photograph now sat on his office desk in a silver frame, surrounded by professional achievements and corporate recognition. But its significance hadn't diminished. If anything, it had deepened. Zara's gap-toothed smile represented not just his motivation for enduring hardship, but his inspiration for pursuing excellence. The phone rang at 8:30 p.m., Victoria calling with updates about the next week's assignments. As they discussed logistics and client requirements, Marcus realized how naturally leadership had returned to his daily routine. The skills that had felt dormant during his restaurant years had simply been waiting for appropriate application. "By the way," Victoria mentioned as their call concluded, "I had coffee with Detective Rodriguez yesterday. She mentioned that Derek completed his rehabilitation program and found employment with a nonprofit organization. Apparently he's doing well." "I'm glad to hear that." She also said something interesting. She said watching you handle that situation taught her something about the difference between reacting and responding, between letting circumstances control you and taking control of circumstances. After hanging up, Marcus walked through their house, checking locks and security systems with the same methodical attention he brought to protecting foreign dignitaries. Some habits from his hypervigilant years would never fade, but now they served family comfort rather than basic survival. Zara's bedroom door stood slightly open, revealing her sleeping form surrounded by books, soccer gear, and the stuffed elephant she'd treasured since childhood. The contrast between this peaceful scene and the financial anxiety that had once dominated their lives felt profound. Marcus adjusted her blankets quietly, the same protective gesture he'd performed thousands of times in their old apartment. But now it carried different weight. Not the desperate hope of a struggling parent, but the confident assurance of someone whose ability to provide and protect had been fully realized. Looking at his daughter's face, relaxed in sleep, Marcus understood that his transformation hadn't been about becoming someone new. It had been about integrating all the parts of himself that had always existed, the soldier, the father, the protector, the leader, into a coherent identity that served others while honoring his own potential. The invisible server had become visible not through dramatic gestures, but through consistent demonstration of character under pressure. The strength that saved lives at Bella Vista had been there all along, expressed through smaller acts of service and care that prepared him for the moment when extraordinary action became necessary. Marcus Williams had proved that heroes live among us, often invisible, often overlooked. Sometimes they wear uniforms, sometimes they wear aprons, sometimes they wear tailored suits in corporate boardrooms. But they're always ready when the moment demands courage, compassion, and the willingness to put others' welfare above their own safety. The question isn't whether you have what it takes to be a hero. It's whether you'll recognize the moment when it's your turn to step out of the shadows. Whether you'll trust that the strength you've been quietly developing through daily acts of service and protection is enough to meet whatever crisis demands your response. Heroes don't announce themselves with fanfare. They simply show up when needed, do what must be done, and return to the quiet work of building lives worth protecting. In Marcus Williams' case, that quiet work now included raising a daughter who understood that true strength reveals itself not through seeking recognition, but through consistently choosing to serve something greater than yourself. And in his experience, that was the most heroic calling of all. If this story inspired you to see the heroes hiding in plain sight, share it with someone who needs to remember their own hidden strength, and subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.